that's going to change the direction of this country? Like, what in you, like, not your platform, not what you're supposed to say. Like, how do you actually feel that's different than you did before? Like, what were the mistakes? And how can those mistakes that you made be lessons for all of America, for a moment of reflection on how we treat black people in this country?
Obviously, I know more about the civil rights movement in the old days because I had a lot of involvement in working with people. So they had a plan, this piece of legislation, this court case we're going to make, et cetera, et cetera. I think that there has to be a reckoning. I agree with that. But I also think there has to be some positive vision and plan that you can move people toward. I mean, once you say, you know, this country has still not recovered from its original sin, which is true. Once you say that, then the next question by people who are on the sidelines, which is the vast majority of Americans, the next question is, well, so what do you want me to do about it? What am I supposed to do about it? That's what I'm trying to put together in a way that I can explain it and I can sell it. Because in politics, if you can't explain it and you can't sell it, it stays on the shelf.
I stand here in your space, and I say this as respectfully as I can, but if you don't tell black people what we need to do, then we won't tell you all what you need to do.
Well, I'm not telling you, I'm just telling you to tell me.
What I mean to say is that this is and has always been a wet problem of violence. It's not, there's not much that we can do to stop the violence against us.
Well, if
and
that
it's
is
a conversation that I push back.
I understand what you're saying.
Also respectfully.
Yeah. Well, respectfully, if that is your position, then I will talk only to white people about how we are going to deal with the very real problems.
That's not what I mean. That's not what I mean.
No.
But like what I'm saying is, what you just said was a form of victim blaming, right? You were saying that what the Black Lives Matter movement needs to do to change white hearts is
no, I'm not talking about.
policy
Look, I don't
change.
believe you change hearts. I believe you change laws, you change allocation of resources, you change the way systems operate. You're not going to change every heart. You're not. I mean, if we're honest, for a lot of well-meaning, open-minded white people, the sight of a young black man in a hoodie still evokes a twinge of fear.
Not just gangs of kids anymore. They are often the kinds of kids that are called super predators. No conscience, no empathy. We can talk about why they ended up that way, but first we have to bring them to heel.
Common sense gun reform, criminal justice reform, and all the like. So I think we've got we've got somebody saying here, we have to bring them
apologize for mass incarceration.
Okay, we'll talk
I'm
about it.
not a super predator, Hillary Clinton.
Okay, fine, we'll talk
You
about it.
apologize to black people for mass incarceration?
Well, can I talk, and then maybe you can listen to what I say? Okay, fine. Thank you very much. There's a lot of issues in this campaign. The very first speech that I gave back in April was about criminal justice reform
You called black
and
people
about
super predators.
You're being rude. That's not appropriate.
Super predators. That's rude.
This is not appropriate.
That's rude.
Yeah, you want to hear the facts, you just want to
I
talk.
know that you called black youth super predators in 1994. Please explain the record. Explain it to us. You owe black people an apology.
Excuse us. That's an
Tell you what, if you will give me a chance to talk, I'll approach your side. You know what? Nobody's ever asked me before. You're the first person to ask me, and I'm happy to address it, but you are the first person to ask me here. Okay, back to the issues.
Not just gangs of kids anymore. They are often the kinds of kids that are called super predators. No conscience, no empathy. We can talk about why they ended up that way, but first we have to bring them to heel.
In 1994, Bill Clinton wanted to pass a crime legislation, and it was 3 strikes bill. So if you have 3 felonies, you get a life sentence. Hillary Clinton was the first lady and aggressively lobbied for it. Very rarely was the term super predator ever used in reference to white kids. Perhaps sometimes in reference to the Columbine kids, but almost always when talking about black kids in inner cities who are in gangs. So I'm giving you the full context. It wasn't just that she was talking about super predators, and it wasn't just regular old kids walking down the street. But was it racially used, that term, Yes, it most certainly was. It was used over and over by Republicans, adopted by the Clintons to scare everybody. Oh, watch out for the super predators. Is that quote accurate? Hell yes, it's accurate. I remember when we first ran the story based on a story by Michelle Alexander, who was one of the leading African-American scholars in this country. People couldn't believe the quote. And by the way, let's be clear, Columbine, of course, happened after '94. So when they were talking about this, it was almost completely used for African-American kids. If you think this is the family that was so great to African Americans,
I've been reading this book, The New Jim Crow, and it's got some gnarly stuff about Hillary Clinton. It says when her husband was president, she lobbied Congress to increase the drug war and mass incarceration. And the best-selling author of the book, civil rights lawyer Michelle Alexander, says, Bill Clinton's tough-on-crime policies resulted in the largest increase in federal and state prison inmates of any president in American history. But Clinton was not satisfied with exploding prison populations. He and the New Democrats championed legislation banning drug felons from public housing and denying them basic public benefits, including food stamps for life. Discrimination in virtually every aspect of political, economic, and social life is now perfectly legal if you've been labeled a felon. What do you think about that, 1994 Hillary Clinton?
It's a very well thought out crime bill that is both smart and tough.
1 out of 3 African American men may well end up going to prison. That's the statistic. I want people here to think what we would be doing if it was 1 out of 3 white men.
It's a very well thought out crime bill that is both smart and tough.
I said tonight that part of the blame should have been in terms of incarceration on the 1994 Clinton crime bill. A very cheap shot was thrown to me by a PhD who said that's sexist. I said absolutely it's not. If you're going to name a policy that you didn't like about Bush and you're going to put his name on it, you must put Clinton's policy, his name on that policy. Clinton knew what he was doing. He did it anyway. Sanders was one of the only people who stood on the floor at that time and said this is going to disproportionately affect black people. If you are familiar with this book or you're familiar with that 1994 crime bill, which sent many of my friends away, she is not the candidate you should be voting for.
Almost 25% of the world's total prison population. This bill would have put more police on the street, would have locked up violent offenders so they never could get out again, would have given more prison construction money.
And soon, Democrats began competing with Republicans to prove they could be even tougher on them.
And so it was President Bill Clinton who escalated the drug war far beyond what his Republican predecessors even dreamed possible. And it was President Clinton that championed laws denying federal financial aid to drug offenders for college. It was President Clinton who championed laws banning people with criminal convictions from access to public housing so that people wouldn't have housing upon release from prison. It was the Clinton administration that championed laws denying even food stamps under federal law to people who were once caught with drugs. To a large extent, the basic architecture of this new caste system was championed by a Democratic administration desperate to win back the so-called white swing voters, the folks who had defected from the Democratic Party in the wake of the civil rights movement.
Not just gangs of kids anymore. They are often the kinds of kids that are called super predators. No conscience, no empathy. We can talk about why they ended up that way, but first we have to bring them to heal. 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 Bring them to heal.
The woman who was standing beside Bill Clinton when he signed the Welfare Act admitted before she died that it was the wrong move, that working didn't help her. She worked at a job where she made a little bit of money, and even if after she made a little bit of money, she still couldn't afford her medicine. Clinton used her, just like he used black people, just like Hillary Clinton is using black people now. I'm kind of tired of being used.
By the time Bill and I left the White House, welfare rolls had dropped 60%.
This was a blunderbuss. This was just an axe, a hatchet. 6 million, 2% of our population have no income except those food stamps. The food stamps is the sole thing that stands between them and being totally without any income.
I want to talk about this story that CNN.com put out dealing with the recession worsens racial wealth gap. Whites have a net worth about 20 times that of blacks and about 18 times that of Hispanics. Who's to blame for this?
She was very close to Robert Rubin, to Lawrence Summers, to the people in the Clinton administration.
This duo has gutted and devastated the black community. You can draw a line from the evaporation of black wealth in the black community back to the deregulation of the Clinton years. I would be hard pressed to find in recent memory another president who's been quite as damaging.
The same Confederate flag Bree Newsom took down from above the South Carolina State House represents the exact same slave-owning and traitorous Confederacy for which Bill Clinton signed a resolution stating that the highest star on the Arkansas flag represented. To this day, they still have an official Confederate Flag Day. And not only did Bill and Hillary never say anything about this, but for 12 years, they celebrated the Confederacy too. I wouldn't want to talk about my past either.
Perhaps the most important wreckage to take a look at is really the wreckage of the Democratic Party.
We cannot keep imprisoning more people than anybody else in the world.
Does no one else see the hypocrisy? Forget about super predators in the 1994 crime bill. When Hillary Clinton said this, she was actively using lobbyists from two major private prison companies to raise campaign cash. And she only stopped taking money from associates of the GEO Group and Corrections Corporations of America after Black Lives Matter and other activists confronted her. But even now, she has campaign staffers that lobby directly for GEO Group on her payroll.
Do you still have the support of Hillary Clinton?
I still support her, and that question of whether I continue to have her support is up to her, but I feel pretty confident I do.
You cannot call yourself an ally if you are going to stand behind a mayor of a city who actively participated in the suppression of a dash cam video showing an execution by a Chicago police officer of a young black man.
For those of you who have not yet made up your minds, or maybe even some of you who have made up your minds, to maybe consider and reconsider what it is that Bernie Sanders offers. He offers us a chance to declare unequivocally that there is an America, that there is a group of citizens with a deep caring for where our nation goes and what it does in the process of going.
Yesterday, Hillary Clinton proposed changing marijuana from a Schedule I to a Schedule II narcotic so researchers could do more study on the impact of medical marijuana. You've been outspoken about the need for the federal government to kind of back off applying federal law on marijuana. What's your take on her move?
I think she's recognizing public sentiment. I've been here for my entire career wanting to reform criminal justice. During the Clinton era, the drug laws that Bill Clinton and some Republicans voted for have locked up a generation of young black men in our country. The drug war has disproportionately, not purposely, but disproportionately been applied to African Americans, Hispanics, and people who live in poverty. And so Clinton is now coming around, but she has to explain why she and her husband supported many of these mandatory minimums where people went to jail for 15 years.
Time and time again, you hear one thing in speeches, and then you see a campaign that has the worst kind of tactics, reminiscent of the same sort of Republican attacks on Democrats. Well, I am here to say that it is not only wrong, but it is undermining core democratic principles. Since when do Democrats attack one another on universal health care? I've looked at the legislation that Senator Sanders has proposed, and basically he does eliminate the Affordable Care Act, eliminates private insurance, eliminates Medicare, eliminates Medicaid, TRICARE, Children's Health Insurance Program. Just because Senator Obama chose not to present a universal health care plan does not give him the right to attack me because I did. So let's have a real campaign. Enough with the speeches and the big rallies and then using tactics that are right out of Karl Rove's playbook. This is wrong, and every Democrat should be outraged. The Democratic Party in the United States worked since Harry Truman to get the Affordable Care Act passed. So shame on you, Barack Obama. It is time you ran a campaign consistent with your messages in public.
I have a lifetime of experience that I will bring to the White House. I know Senator McCain has a lifetime of experience that he will bring to the White House. And Senator Obama has a speech he gave in 2002.
We just had the tape. You just said that I complimented the Republican ideas. That is not true.
What I said is that Ronald Reagan was a transformative political figure because he was able to get Democrats to vote against their economic interests to form a majority to push through their agenda, an agenda that I objected to because while I was working on those streets, watching those folks see their jobs shipped overseas, you were a corporate lawyer sitting on the board of Walmart.
The persistent scourge of child labor.
I'm always proud of Walmart and what we do.
Clinton also took a role in supporting a Buy America program.
One of the reasons we want to buy America is because we love America.
Walmart continued to get most of its products from overseas during its Buy America program, including from this factory in Bangladesh that used 11 and 12-year-old girls.
The persistent scourge of child labor.
New York has spent a considerable amount of money and effort devising very good tests.
I will end the unfunded mandate known as No Child Left Behind. I do not believe that our children are little test takers. And I do not believe that our teachers should be nothing but test givers.
When you narrow the curriculum and you focus just on those tests, you really demoralize teachers.
Today is the 12th of January 2016, 6 years after the earthquake. And for us, it was important to be in front of the Clinton Foundation because Bill Clinton, as head of the interim Haiti Recovery Commission, was responsible for the $6 billion. He had unlimited control of this money. 6 years after the earthquake, Haiti is in worse condition than it was in 2010. Only Bill Clinton can tell the world what happened with this money.
Hillary Clinton's attempt to tout her foreign policy experience hounded her again on the campaign trail today.
I made a mistake in describing it.
She claimed she misspoke last week and was sleep deprived when she described landing under sniper fire in Tuzla, Bosnia, something that didn't happen. But CBS News has found several times in the past few months when Senator Clinton used the Bosnia trip to try to show her international experience. December in Iowa.
We landed in one of those corkscrew landings and ran out because they said there might be sniper fire. I don't remember anybody offering me tea on the tarmac when that was happening.
Then in February.
The welcoming ceremony had to be moved inside because of sniper fire.
And last week.
I remember landing under sniper fire. We basically were told to run to our cars. Now that is what happened.
I know you recall, ducking under sniper fire, and Sinbad in his account, who was on the trip, he said that the most dangerous part was remembering where he was going to eat next.
He's a comedian, Jeff. He's a comedian.
So you actually recall, hearing gunfire, and were you
when we were flying into Bosnia, we came in a evasive maneuver. There was no greeting ceremony. And we basically were told to run to our cars. Now that is what happened.
After CBS News video showed what really happened when she landed and greeted officials, Senator Clinton maintained there were risks, but explained to the Philadelphia Daily News why she was seen on the Bosnian tarmac greeting a young child if it was really so dangerous.
I was also told that the greeting ceremony had been moved away from the tarmac, but that there was this 8-year-old girl, and I said, well, I can't rush by her. I've got to at least greet her. So I greeted her, I took her stuff, and I left. Now that's my memory of it.
Good to see you.
Once again, her memory doesn't match our videotape. She and her daughter Chelsea lingered on the tarmac to greet U.S. military officials. Took photos. There was the group of 7th graders on the tarmac too. And then Senator Clinton walked to the armored vehicle where she did eventually duck and enter.
I remember landing under sniper.
Yeah, no, wait, that's what I said when I was sleep deprived. You can read my book, and I said something very different. Yeah, I misspoke. Yeah, I totally misspoke. I've talked about this endlessly. I wrote about it, and I don't know what I was thinking because, yeah, we were told that we had to land under, some threats, and but that was just sleep deprivation or something.
Yeah, I have been often to, the mothership in New York City. But it's good to have an outpost of the council right here down the street from the State Department. We get a lot of advice from the council, so this will mean I won't have as far to go to be told what we should be doing and how we should think about the future. Richard just gave what could be described as a mini version of my remarks in talking about the issues that confront us. But I look out at this audience filled with not only many friends and colleagues, but people who have served in prior administrations. And so there is never a time when the inbox is not full.
I'm Hillary Clinton. I have been proud and privileged to serve as First Lady, as a senator from New York, and as Secretary of State. I'm the granddaughter of a factory worker and the grandmother of a wonderful one-year-old child. And every day I think about what we need to do to make sure that opportunity is available, not just for her, but for all of our children. I have spent a very long time, my entire adult life, looking for ways to even the odds to help people have a chance to get ahead. And in particular, to find the ways for each child to live up to his or her God-given potential.
It's absurd to suggest she's a friend of children who are in need or families. This is a woman who, when her husband was governor, I first met her at that time when I went down to interview him for the Los Angeles Times, and he was starting his presidential run. And they were bragging about their welfare reform, which destroyed what existed of support for poor children in Arkansas. Then as president, her husband, with her full-throated approval, destroyed the aid to families with dependent children, which 70% of the people on that program were children. It was the major federal program to help poor people and poor families. And in the cynicism of the Clinton administration, they destroyed that program. And we don't even have an accounting of poor children anymore. They're all off the radar. So that's just utter nonsense. And then her husband, after all, and she, again, was a full-throated support. She was very close to Robert Rubin, to Lawrence Summers, to the people in the Clinton administration who gave us the radical deregulation of Wall Street, which, caused incredible misery in the Great Recession, the Clinton signing on the collateralized debt obligation law, which allowed all that junk to be legal, the Commodity Futures Modernization Act, the Financial Service Modernization Act, the Reverse Glass-Steagall. So they're the ones that opened the door to the Wall Street thieves that brought on the Great Recession. And then as senator, she's carried water for Wall Street faithfully. And then finally, if we're going to run for somebody who has experience as Secretary of State, I'd rather support John Kerry. After all, it's been a great relief to see Kerry as opposed to Hillary Clinton. We finally have some rational foreign policy and peacemaking with Iran, with Cuba. Where was Hillary Clinton? And let me say, one reason I could never vote for Hillary Clinton is that her attack on Edward Snowden, her attack on the whistleblowers, to call them traitors, to talk about these people. And here is a woman who knew what the government was doing and spying on the American people. She didn't tell us. She didn't trust the State Department with her email, but she never told us that the State Department, the CIA, and the NSA were spying on the emails of all the Americans. No, she thinks that's fine. She's just going to keep her email in her garage, So I find her to be a center of cynicism and opportunism and really quite reckless.
He asked, if indicted, would she drop out of the race? Listen to her response.
I think that what we've got here is a case of overclassification. I am not concerned about it. I am not worried about it. And no Democrat or American should be either.
The questions were, Secretary Clinton, the questions were, who gave you permission to operate? Was it President Obama?
There was no permission to be asked. It had been done by my predecessors. It was permitted. I didn't have to ask anyone.
If you get indicted, would you drop out?
Oh, for goodness, that is not going to happen. I'm not even answering that question.
Right, the audience was cheering, were they not? Let's see if Judge Andrew Napolitano is cheering along with the audience there.
Well, I'm sorry that she gave answers like that, because she knows that if she's indicted, she will be forced to drop out. And she knows that there's a substantial legal case being built against her by the FBI, which was listening to what she said last night. And she knows that the FBI will call her in and say, Mrs. Clinton, here's the evidence we have. Shall we present it to a grand jury, or do you want to work with us about it? And that's a Hobson's choice that she really doesn't ever want to make. The law will not force her. But the fact that an indicted human being out on bail and subject to the court subject to the summons of the court on a moment's notice, is on a national political ticket, I think would cause even the Democrats to reconsider the wisdom of this.
Why would she be out on bail? You'd have to arrest her and charge her to do that.
She technically would be arrested, technically, at the time she appeared in court to plead not guilty.
That bad?
Yes, that bad. That bad. A mugshot and fingerprints.
She was asked, Jorge Ramos specifically went right there and he said, look, if indicted, are you going to drop out? And she said, oh, that's ridiculous. I'm not even going to answer the question.
I think when she says things like that, accompanied by what she said earlier, I neither sent nor received anything marked classified, when we all know that nothing is marked classified. It's a dog whistle to the FBI. It says to the FBI, her natural inclination is to lie. That question should be asked of Mrs. Clinton in every single remaining debate.
What, the question being, if indicted, will you drop out?
Yes.
That's the question?
Yes, that's the question.
Well, she's going to always respond in the same way.
The more she responds in that way, the less credibility she'll have.
Judge, the guy gets immunity. There is a grand jury, has been empaneled and is hearing evidence. Surely Hillary should be really worried about this.
Hillary should be terrified, and I'll tell you why. Our colleagues Catherine Herridge and Pamela Brown have a piece coming up on FoxNews.com as we speak, explaining what the Justice Department lawyers will ask Mr. Pagliano to explain to the grand jury. How he was able to migrate a State Department secure system onto her private server. Question, Mr. Pagliano, did Mrs. Clinton give you her personal Secretary of State password to enable you to do that? If he answers yes, we have an indictment for misconduct in office as well as espionage. She should be terrified of the fact that he's been granted immunity. We also know they're going to seek someone's indictment because they would not be immunizing him and thereby inducing him to spill his guts unless they wanted to indict someone. Now, we don't know who it is. There's 4 or 5 people between Brian Pagliano and Mrs. Clinton.
This is from Hillary Clinton's press secretary. It goes on to say, she has encouraged everyone to cooperate, talking about Hillary Clinton, because we want to make every good faith effort to be transparent and answer any questions that people have. Goes on to say, with Mr. Pagliano, we encouraged him as well, because we don't think he has any reason to not be transparent.
They are out of their minds. That is a response written by their political people and not by their legal people. Mr. Pagliano is their nightmare. Mrs. Clinton, our investigation is completed. Would you like to come in and be interviewed by us? No lawyer whose client has been investigated for a white-collar crime would ever say yes to that question without knowing what the feds know, and the feds won't tell the lawyer what they know. On the other hand, Mrs. Clinton is running for president of the United States. If she refuses to go in for that interview, her opponents will have a field day. Wait a minute, you say you're innocent, you don't want to tell the FBI? Either way, she loses. Anybody who thinks that this will go away because they hope it will go away or they want to wish it away is living in a dreamland. This is a serious investigation by serious people who don't give a whip, to quote the director of the FBI, about politics.
So you said at a March press conference in 2015, quote, I did not email any classified material.
Here's what happens. The State Department has a process for determining what is or isn't classified. If they determine it is, they mark it as classified.
Well, who decides?
The State Department decides.
But what about you when you're typing an email?
No, the State Department decides.
Your contention now is the 2,101 emails contained information that should be classified at any time. That should be now or then. You're just saying shouldn't have been classified.
Well, what I'm saying is it wasn't at the time.
She forgets who her audience is. Her audience is 100 FBI agents in the Justice Department investigating her, and they know she is lying when she answers the question to Bret Baier. When she says for the umpteenth time, I neither sent nor received anything marked classified. Nothing is marked classified. The markings are confidential, secret, or top secret. So while the statement is technically correct, I never sent nor received anything marked classified, it is highly misleading. It is materially misleading. Second point, on her first day in office, she received a 2-hour tutorial from 2 FBI agents explaining to her what makes an email confidential, secret, or top secret is not a stamp or a marking on it. It's the contents of it. And you, as the Secretary of State, as the country's chief diplomat, have a legal obligation to recognize state secrets when you see them. There were state secrets on 2,000 emails. I didn't know they were state secrets until the State Department told me they were. That's called gross negligence. That's a basis for a criminal prosecution for the failure to secure state secrets.
They appear to be an explanation of how this whole thing is just blown out of all proportion. And I suspect many, many people will accept that on face value. I think she might have won politically.
And that'll be useless to her when she's confronted with the following. Mrs. Clinton, this is the Justice Department calling. We have a lot of evidence about your behavior we'd like to discuss with you and your lawyers. I don't want to see you. Okay, we'll discuss it with a grand jury.
That's what's going to happen?
She will have the Hobson's choice of talking to the FBI or not talking. If she does talk, they will leak it. And she will be the first person running for president of the United States who was compelled to justify her behavior to the FBI. If she doesn't talk, they'll go to a grand jury and they'll leak it. This was all done because she wanted to stop transparency. She wanted to keep her behavior from the rest of the State Department and from us under the Freedom of Information Act.
She should have just said, this is why I did it.
Yes. Okay. She's already said many, many times, quote, I can't wait to speak to the FBI. Now, when she says that, that's a lie. The FBI knows it's a lie. Yeah, nobody can't wait to speak to the FBI when you have a potential criminal defendant and you don't know what they have.
But she could say, look, her lawyer could say, look, I don't want my client to, hurt her chances or implicate her, so we're just going to have to say no.
If she says no, that is the prudent legal advice.
That's right.
But politically, it would be catastrophic for her. She could be prosecuted whether she intentionally exposed them or negligently exposed them, and how she had the affirmative legal duty to recognize a secret when she saw one.
And Pagliano was just a private guy, or he worked for the State Department, or what?
He worked for her campaign. He worked for her presidential campaign. He worked for her senatorial campaign. He worked for the